How's it going, everyone? Thanks for joining me on a new episode of Talking Tracks on the Music Reviewer Podcast. My name is Josh. Yeah, we're doing another Talking Tracks because it seems like that's always the most popular thing on the podcast side and I guess YouTube recently. And we're just back at it with a batch of 10 tracks that I think are interesting and cool at the moment. And then, of course, we will follow that with the Best and Worst Track of the Week segment that is now in its, final form almost, because we used to do that literally every week. Now we just drop it every so often where we literally just talk about just the best and worst track of the week. And if you're new to the Music Reviewer Podcast, welcome. And if you're just new to the Talking Tracks concept, all it is me talking about the new entries that came into the Billboard Hot 100. And then this week, this episode of Talking Tracks, we're just going to be covering the month of February. We're a little bit behind because it's June already. March, April, May, and then I guess eventually June, we'll get to at some point. But I think this year I had to look at the current state of the Hot 100. It looks pretty standard. I will say there is a lot more country than I've seen in the past few months. For instance, Parmalee, probably one of the most forgettable country acts of recent memory. They have a 22 ranked song on the Hot 100 right now, ahead of Kodak Black and other artists that I think are way more relevant, but that's beyond the point. There's a bunch of album bomb remnants in here from Kendrick Lamar, Post Malone, and Bad Bunny, it looks like. And yeah, I will say that one thing I've noticed is Bad Bunny's still pretty relevant in terms of Hot 100. The tracks are spread all over, but he has 2 in the top 10. So we'll get more into that here in a sec, but let's just go ahead and get into the Talking Tracks segment, where we talk about just 10 tracks that I think are pretty cool right now. First one was 2001 by Foals, veteran indie rock act at this point that has lost maybe about half of its original lineup. Pretty much just comprised of the front man and maybe the lead guitarist at this point. But anyways, they're still doing their thing. They still sound interesting. This track in particular, I like the upbeat, energetic presence that they bring to their brand of indie rock. The scratchy guitar hook kind of helps them evolve past their typical chirpy staccato guitar usage. The band seems to be moving past just being a rock band on this track as well. They're leaning more on the pop side, and leaning more, I guess, to maybe attract more fans outside of just maybe the indie rock base they have. I hear a slight Clash influence, the band The Clash, on here, so I think this is a cool way for them to evolve. I'm not sure though if they can really do much in this sort of realm of indie pop where they lean more on the pop, because the best Foals tracks have been more of just these sort of hard-hitting grooves where the band plays tightly as an ensemble and there's a bunch of energy, but I can kind of see where they're going here and it's not bad. Next track, Blessing by Alex G. Alex G doing his thing, constantly making original music with a fresh sound and kind of just not really sticking to just one thing. Here I love the gritty and distorted synths that introduce the track, which show up every now and again in interlude sections, and I dig the relaxed feel coming from the crisp drum track that guides most of the track, and guides most of the instrumentation on the track. I like the mysterious question and answer between lead guitar and Alex's whispering vocals on the verses, and the fullness of all the textures when combined is just quite beautiful. Lots of color in the mix overall. It's a cool song. I think this means there's also an album coming soon. If not, a project that I might have missed, but I don't think he's dropped an album yet. Next track, Interpol, or Fables by Interpol, another veteran indie rock act, this time being American. I'm sure if you're no stranger to the post-punk revival in New York, Interpol is definitely one of those names that goes along with all those acts. I will say, ever since they're in the mid 2010s when they came back from hiatus, they kind of gotten a little stale. Because that El Pintor, that album they came back with, was one of my favorite Interpol albums. But they just have not been able to get back to that level. Fables, I will say, another disappointing cut from them. It's definitely more on the lighter side in terms of like Interpol. There's definitely a laid back nature here. I believe the lead singer, frontman Paul, his vocals seem a tad more buried in the mix than usual. It seems like it's more of a symptom of him maybe being unable to project as loud as he could have in the past. And then it's just a weaker cut guitar wise. Usually there's more energy behind the instrumentals. And it just kind of seems like the guitar and other aspects of the track are just there because they are quote unquote a band in a guitar based act. But you know, a lot of the textures and instrumentation doesn't really add much to the track, unfortunately. Another cool track though, after this Interpol one, by Remi Wolf with Michael. I believe this is a lead single after the recent album she dropped last year. I do think this is fresh. If I'm wrong, sorry. But yeah, the cool track here. I love the hookiness that kicks the track right off from the get-go. Remi's vocals fluctuate between her falsetto to hit the Michael notes. Those moments when it happens is quite nice. And then more of like a grungy rock side here from Remi that is shown on this track. Pretty cool track overall. There's a lot of emotional tension on here that's quite apparent. That helps bring the track a sort of sense of captivation overall. So you can hear a lot of like different emotions on here: desperation, anger, love, maybe on here. Definitely, probably one of my favorite Remi Wolf tracks I've heard. Next track was actually a bit of a surprise, mainly because I have not heard much of this artist, and I think they should be a little bit more relevant, but I think that's just a consequence of them maybe not dropping as much music as they could have. Princess Nokia with Diva. This is probably one of the best R&B rap cuts I've heard from a female artist in quite some time. I love the soft, smooth timbre of Nokia's vocals while singing and rapping. The smooth 2000s R&B aesthetic here on this track is definitely alive and well. The trumpet samples thrown in to color the track as opposed to just being cheaply used, like so much pop music abused in the 2010s. I'm looking at you, Neo Soul. And I like the overall theme of this track, of just like looking up to other female pop artists that came before her. And I like the aspect of just having appreciation here. And it's just a hooky chorus overall. One of these tracks that deserves to probably be a hit, but probably, you know, maybe it's good that she's kind of staying under the radar. Next track, Blue Light by Hazel English. Her last album was one of the first reviews we did on this podcast, and it's probably one of my favorite albums from the year 2020. Definitely the sound from that album has gone on the by the wayside for Hazel English, because she certainly evolved at this point, especially with this track. The vocals, I think, are mixed a bit softer than I would like, in contrast with the rich instrumentals on here. And the overall direction on the track is quite intriguing. However, for like a Hazel English track, it's different as well. And she has certainly evolved past her debut, where she was also essentially kind of like a cut copy from Daywave. Here on this track, the piano keyboard sounds are at the forefront of the track. However, it's just mixed a bit weird. There's a rich fullness to this that has a sort of evolved past like her dream pop norms. I don't mind this. I think there's potential. I'd like to definitely see where she goes in the context of a whole project, like an album. Next one from another indie rock vet act, Phoenix, this time going back to Europe, France, with Alpha Zulu. This is a cool track. I will say I've not been disappointed by Phoenix as opposed to other indie rock contemporaries that they were relevant with, like around the early 2010s, late 2000s. This track has that sort of danciness and energy we had in Ti Amo. That was an underrated album, in my opinion. The groovy, syncopated bass track driving this here is quite familiar with a lot of the stuff that happened on the album. And it's very much sort of like an aesthetic track for Phoenix. There's some quirky features on here, but it's a bit loopy in the sense that much of everything just repeats over and over. There's not much evolution past that. And I think the track might have had more potential that was close to being tapped into, which is disappointing. They kind of just stopped at a certain point, but not a bad track overall. Next one is probably one of the more interesting tracks this week by Sky Ferreira. I don't know if I'm not gonna check if I said that right. She, of course, is the forgotten, I guess, indie pop star from the 2010s. With the track Don't Forget, I've always liked her music. I think she's had potential, but I guess some unfortunate circumstances has prevented her with various things. I think had she had released more music and really toured and just kept a consistent sort of catalog coming, she'd probably be a lot bigger than she is now. But this track is great. There's a dreamy 80s-esque style to that. To this track that Sky shines on. She usually shines on these new wave sort of tracks. And it works for her. It just does. It makes me wish we would have had more music from her, obviously, like I said earlier. And I like the energy that the electric drum machine brings to this track. The wobbly, gritty bass track is nice as well. That brings a lot of color to everything. And yeah, it's just a cool track overall. Hopefully this means a full project. All right, next track by Maeson with Blood Runs Red. When I was like picking out tracks, I was kind of struggling to find stuff that's like super fresh. This is, I guess, from the month of May, not super fresh, but I was under the impression that it was. But I still wanted to talk about this track, especially because the artist Matt Maeson here, they had a sort of like pseudo hit with the song Hallucinogenics, especially like on the alt radio side. You've probably definitely heard this track. It's essentially like a folk pop track. And I was expecting to hear maybe something more along those lines here, so I wanted to just check this out. But we really just got here a track that just really drives home on the contemporary alternative aesthetics, like the drilling heavy synths that structure the chorus on a bunch of alternative music. I guess take your pick, maybe like stuff that Imagine Dragons is really big on. Also, the spaced out percussion over the mid-tempo, accompanied by anthemic vocals, a la Imagine Dragons again. Thought we would get a bit more originality since this guy released a really strong track, I think, with Hallucinogenics. But the bridge section here is like much stronger than the rest of the track, where we get like some soul influence, and it kind of just diverges from the overbearing all-rock aesthetics, but not a bad track, but I definitely was not expecting this sort of stuff to come from this artist, Matt Maeson. But I will, I guess, check out more music from this guy because I still think there's some potential there. And then last track was one that kind of caught me off guard, but I thought it was interesting. A band that I'm not really familiar with. This is the first track I've ever heard from them. They are called The Haunted Youth with the track Broken. This track kind of opens up with like a pretty common shoegaze dive-esque aesthetic. Dive as in the band. That it caught my attention with how similar it sounded, but the lead guitar material as the song kicked in was more of like a new wave sort of Flock of Seagulls thing going on. Which I thought was interesting. The vocals are an interesting feature as well. They're not necessarily distinguishable, but still somewhat original in a sense, if that makes sense. They're whispering and soft in a weird way, and it works for this track. So there is an original sound overall. The track is a bit one-dimensional and derivative. Again, kind of not really making sense here with my point, but I guess if you listen to the track, you might be able to get what I'm saying. I still think it was enjoyable, especially in the driving instrumental interlude section where there's a lot of energy, distorted guitars that are still, you can hear a lot of the performances and kind of get what they were going with this. So, interesting track. I'm interested in this band, so yeah, pretty cool, song by The Haunted Youth. But yeah, that's the batch of 10 songs. Hopefully I can get another 10 sooner rather than later. That concludes this segment of Talking Tracks. We're going to move forward now with Best and Worst Track of the Week for the month of February. So yeah, kind of late on talking about February, but if I had to be completely honest, pop music has been a bit of a weird place in my opinion, just because of like the output I've seen. There hasn't been like a huge artist in my opinion this year that has kind of taken anyone by storm. That's sort of fresh, unless I'm just living under a rock or I'm not on TikTok enough. But like last year, I guess it was Olivia Rodrigo. And then I guess I've heard some complaints about like where the summer bangers. I'm not sure, but since we're on the month of February, we'll talk about February. I just wanted to give a brief rundown of some of the highlights I saw on like this current chart, which if you're listening to this right now, this might be the previous week, but I looked at the week of June 18th. So very much so into summer. There has been some interesting phenomenons in terms of like pop culture. For instance, Running Up That Hill by the legendary Kate Bush is number 4 on the Hot 100, and that's on a rise. That song debuted as number 8 on the chart because of the usage of the track on Stranger Things. I'm not going to go too into it, but it caught storm amongst Gen Z, and the song's getting the recognition it deserves, and hopefully that means Kate Bush is as well. So yeah, interesting phenomenon there. As It Was by Harry Styles, number 1, which is cool. It's been on the chart for a while, 10 weeks, and it's just number 1 right now. And I guess this is the summer banger maybe, which is interesting because it's not a hip hop or trap song, which I'm not necessarily complaining about. But yeah, not too much other interesting things though. I mean, Big Energy by Lotto is at number 7, which when I first heard that track, I thought it was completely forgettable, but I guess it caught on. And it samples that Tom Tom Club track that I guess has been sampled in various other tracks in the past. So I figured people would have caught on to that and just kind of saw the little cheap gimmick that's being played there. There's 2 Bad Bunny tracks in the top 10. Titi Me Preguntó and Me Porto Bonito. Yeah, so Bad Bunny is relevant as ever. I guess I missed an album drop by them. And I have covered their previous albums, so maybe an album review. We'll see. I do dig Bad Bunny, but at this point, definitely they're just kind of releasing to stay relevant, I think. And this week, of course, is a Post Malone album bomb. Post Malone did drop an album this summer, which there is a track here that debuted at number 9 featuring Doja Cat. Go figure. Have not heard the album. Don't really care for listening to it. No diss on Post Malone though. Just not really my favorite artist at this point. And Zach Bryan. This is the most interesting thing that I think is on the Hot 100 right now. Independent country artist, at least I think still at this point, although they've gotten like a lot of traction over the past year, I'd say. And I don't know, it's because he signed some sort of distribution deal or whatever it may be. I'm seeing them on festival lineups, and they're definitely past the days where this guy is just a DIY dude making music in like a DIY studio somewhere in the middle of nowhere. I did listen to this track that he's charting on. It's number 37 on the Hot 100 and now, Something in the Orange. It's been on for 7 weeks. And it probably won't get much higher, but it's just interesting in the least because, I mean, right now it's in front of a Jason Aldean track. So and the track is not Nashville, like boyfriend country stuff. It's definitely true to his brand of country, which is a sort of outlaw, independent sort of deal. So yeah, pretty cool phenomenon there. And let's go ahead and talk about February, won't we? So I will say February did not have much going on. But I will say there wasn't anything that was like absurdly bad either. Like the week of February 5th, it was a YoungBoy Never Broke Again album bomb, which, you know, it was a big taxing to get through. There was an interesting track between Kalani and Young Blue with Beautiful Eyes. I almost gave that best track of the week. And then that Light Switch song by Charlie Puth I thought was interesting as well. Nothing else there wasn't really much else to talk about because of the album bomb. So, best track of the week was a YoungBoy Never Broke Again track with Long Live. It's just, it won by default because it was probably just the least annoying track on this album. I like the subtle electronic synth melodies on here. YoungBoy sounds present the entire track and executes quite seamlessly without much pauses or interludes and no features, which I kudos to him on that. Not much of a hook on here, but the chorus section is still decent and impressive with the back and forth between the rapping and vocals. I will say, there is some merit there on a lot of these newer, I guess, post SoundCloud rap trap guys. That a lot of them are super talented in terms of like being able to rap with a decent flow and go between vocals. So it kind of just makes me, I think rap is sort of evolving where you have to do both now in some facets. So yeah, pretty cool track in that sense. But worst track of the week was a YoungBoy Never Broke Again track with no switch. It sounds like a pretty standard YoungBoy Broke Again song. There's an aggressive flow with triplet bass hits. So yeah, you can expect that from a lot of his tracks. There's a kind of like loose sort of flair to this where nothing really seems all that organized. Again, not surprising. The lyrics are just incredibly cheesy. I don't think they're well thought out. It becomes clumsy and messy around 2 minutes and it's just not listenable, I think, at that point. So yeah, that was the first week of February. The next week was the week of February 12th. This was this is one of the more diverse weeks of new tracks that enters the Hot 100. There is some diversity here with a track by Tiesto and Ava Max, Making the Stallion, a Latin artist, Carlos Vives, XXXTentacion, Miranda Lambert. So yeah, probably one of the more interesting weeks, but probably one of the worst tracks I've heard, actually. An outlier, but one of the worst tracks I've ever heard. But we'll start with the first best track of the week. Johnny P's Caddy by Benny the Butcher and J. Cole. Pretty good track. I guess Benny the Butcher's part of Griselda because I heard a Griselda reference. But I will say the reason why this is best track of the week is because J. Cole sounds organic over this beat and it's really good. His presence is definitely dominant over Benny the Butcher, despite Benny the Butcher having a really good verse. And the beat is a bit bare, but it could have used some warmth, but it doesn't really matter just because of the rap chops and verses and everything put together by one of the best rappers in the game, admittedly at this point, J. Cole. So yeah, great track. I think it pretty much won by default. There wasn't really anything close, unfortunately. I guess I like the Tiesto Ava Max track, but also, I wanted to point out another highlight of this week. The track Infinity by James Young. I didn't see it on the Hot 100 right now. I'm glad it's gone. It's a pretty bad song. It sounds like if Sia gave up. But yeah, speaking of giving up, the Chainsmokers with High, the worst track of the week. They sound like they've given up. I don't know if it's because they know they're dying, if no one's really listening to them anymore, and if there's people are listening to them, it's probably, just diehards. Just a disgusting, dry, plucked guitar texture that just structures this track over like this outdated trap beat. Disgusting electronic elements and colors thrown into the track to give some sort of sense of development, but it ends up just like deadening the track even further. There's an abrupt transition to like an early 2010s club breakdown, which, are they trying to bring that back? I don't know. And who's seriously listening to the Chainsmokers anymore? I really want to know. One of the worst tracks I've heard in a while. That's all I want to say about it. And for the second of last week of February, we have the week of February 19th. I thought this was a very mid week in terms of quality. Nothing was bad. Like, terrible, but everything was like around B-ish, if I do a letter grade. Honorable mention to Tate McRae's She's All I Want to Be. I think this track, even though it's not the most original sort of thing I've heard, it kind of hits on some sort of pop rock that we lost in pop music. I will say maybe it's a little Avril Lavigne-esque, but not totally Avril Lavigne, and it has hints of pop punk. But this is more of like on the bridge of being like an adult contemporary track, or adult alternative track, mixed with like some youthful energy, and like some like pop sensibilities, which is different from like the other Tate McRae tracks we've heard. But nonetheless, good track, but I didn't think it was the best this week. There's some Machine Gun Kelly and Willow. Machine Gun Kelly being like the forefront of like the neo-modern post or pop punk sound at the moment. There's a Red Hot Chili Peppers track in here, which some of the stuff I've heard from that album that they released with John Frusciante, I don't know. It just does not have the same charm of prior to him leaving the band. It's very interesting. Like, they kind of still sound like they have the other guy, Josh Klinghoffer, whatever his name was. So yeah, it's just a bit of a head scratcher. Some good rap cuts. The King Von and 21 Savage track. Don't Play That. Also Scared Money by YG and J. Cole. Moneybagg Yo. Pretty good track. But worst track of the week. I almost gave it to that Knot in ASAP Rocky, which I don't know who Knot is, and at this point it's been so long since I've listened to it. Just not a good track. What was even worse though was Hate or Love by Queen Naija and Big Sean. I don't have any idea who Queen Naija is. Big Sean, of course, he's been around for quite a while. This thing is just stale. It's not terrible, but it's just a cliche 2000s R&B, like an R&B love duet between rapper and female artists. Think No Matter What I Do, All I Think About Is You, that one track by Nelly and whoever else was on there. Tracks like that, it just seems like it's been done 1,000 times the same way already, and it's been done better as well at this point. Big Sean's opening mini verse is corny. They should have cut it out. Sean's presence is just predictable and stale as well. The emotional catharsis I think this track is going for just doesn't really happen. It's just pretty meh. And I can hear in the voice and her performance that Queen Naija does have some chops, but it doesn't really help. This track doesn't really help her out, in my opinion. Best track of the week, honestly, caught me by surprise. When I'm Gone by Katy Perry and Alesso. Yeah, Katy Perry's last album didn't really seem to stick with, it didn't really seem to stick in general. I guess I don't hear anyone talking about it. I didn't hear much buzz about it. It kind of just came and went, which happens, especially since she's been making music, pop music, going on maybe 20-ish years at this point. She might be on the tail end of her success, which doesn't mean she can't have any more hits, but I will say though, if she can find some sort of niche, kind of just jumping on dance tracks like this with Alesso, which I believe is one of the founding members of Swedish House Mafia, maybe she can have some sort of, I don't know, reinvention. Because this is a good track. She sounds great on it. Her husky, smoky tone on here blends so well with the track. And the track just gets going right off the bat with the dancey, simple club dance hook sang by her. And there's a house beat that brings the right amount of energy and momentum to this. And it's overall very fun. I think that's what this rest of the other tracks needed. Just a hint of fun. The deep bass hit just right as the track sends itself off. And it's not a bad cut. The electronic embellishments and production handled by Alesso, I'm digging as well. So, probably an outlier and not something I think Katy Perry might embrace, but worth taking into consideration how well she sounded on this dance club hit. Skipping over to the week of February 26th, this was a Super Bowl week. It was a weird week overall, but there was some old rap cuts that came in because I guess the Super Bowl halftime performance. So nothing really too memorable other than that. The next episode by Dr. Dre and Snoop Dogg, but I did not give that best track of the week. I gave Still Dre by Dr. Dre and Snoop Dogg best track of the week because it is a classic West Coast rap song. The iconic keyboard chord progression that loops over the track somehow provides the right amount of hookiness that it needs. Snoop Dogg's performance is quite memorable and one of his best performances ever. Solid track with a lot of angst and grit. I'm sure you've heard it before. Now, no need to explain it any further. Worst track of the week, though, was Bussin' by Nicki Minaj and Lil Baby. Just one of the more, I guess, desperate tracks I've heard by Nicki Minaj. And I am a proponent of Nicki Minaj. I will defend her artistically over most of her contemporaries. So let's just say that. But this track's bad. There's a disgusting robotic flow by Nicki that somehow sounds infinitely better when Lil Baby adopts it somehow. It's just a dumb idea that's thrown all over this track. The back and forth between Lil Baby and Nicki isn't too bad. So the chemistry's there, but I don't really know how relevant this track is in the context of summer, and looking at the recent Billboard Hot 100, no one's listening to it anymore. There was an attempt to make this a little like drill beat centric, so there's some effort there, but just not very good. So yeah, that concludes this week's episode, or not this week's, but this segment of Talking Tracks, and I appreciate you sticking to the very end. Yeah, we'll do the same thing for March when I get to it. Hopefully it's not too far away. But yeah, check out the Music Reviewer on anywhere that you listen to podcasts. Spotify, iTunes, TuneIn, YouTube. We have that YouTube channel up there. Check it out, subscribe, and I'll see you later.